Prepare the royal jet. We are going back to America.
As a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, countless movies will forever be dear to me. Coming to America was one of those movies. I absolutely loved that film, and it shall always be on my top 5 movies of all time. I can quote practically every line in the film. That's how much I love it. Now, I'm from Indonesia and have nothing in common with either Africa or America, and yet this movie still spoke to me, along with my sister and brother, I might add. It's a very special movie to us. There's something magical about watching young Eddie Murphy being funny and fearless, playing a character that we can all relate to. He was definitely in his prime and it showed. Eddie was on fire. Over the years, I have revisited Coming to America too many times to count, and the movie simply has not aged. In fact, with each passing time, I've just grown to love the film even more. There were now jokes that I never really understood when I'd seen it as a kid, or little nuances that I now appreciated more as an adult. The movie never failed to put a smile on my face. When I heard about a potential sequel, I'll be honest here, I never had any high expectations. I kept secretly wishing they'd leave well enough alone. After all, 30 plus years is way too long a time to continue a story, especially a story that had wrapped up perfectly and simply did not need to be extended. Over the years, the sequel talk kept on escalating and it worried me a great deal. I remember when Martin Lawrence wanted to do a sequel because at the time, Eddie seemed like he had never shown much interest in the project. Let's talk about Eddie for a little bit. We all know Eddie simply ruled the 80s with his remarkable performances in Trading Places, 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, what have you. And yes, he did make some profitable movies in the 90s as well, most notably The Nutty Professor. But somewhere along the way, the Eddie we all loved and adored sort of vanished. No longer was he the edgy, hilarious, and unpredictable force in comedy. By the late 90s, Eddie had become more comfortable in starring in family-friendly films like Dr. Dolittle. Aside from Dreamgirls, where he pretty much surprised everyone and even got nominated for an Oscar, Eddie spent a great amount of the 2000s fully embracing his new PG-friendly playground and had ditched whatever raunchy persona he once was famous for. Fast forward to 2019, Eddie starred in an R-rated comedy called Dolomite Is My Name, directed by Craig Brewer. The movie was a biopic of the eccentric entertainer Rudy Ray Moore, and the cast was pretty insane. Chris Rock, Keegan-Michael Key, Wesley Snipes, just to name a few. To say I was jumping with joy when I heard this news would be an understatement. When the film came out, luckily I was not disappointed. Eddie was superb as Rudy. The material was so good and Eddie elevated it. His performance should have garnered more love from the awards circuit, I think. I was also impressed with Craig Brewer's direction. The film was fresh, yet had an old school feel to it simultaneously. They were a great match, so when I then heard that the two will work together again in a sequel to one of Eddie's beloved comedies, I was cautiously optimistic. Here we are now in 2021, 33 long years after the original had come out. The sequel is finally before us. While I was not blown away by the trailers that had been released a few months earlier, I was still very excited to see the film. So, after having seen the film, I can now say that this film was sadly a huge letdown. It didn't take long for me to realize that Coming to America had nothing new to offer. To be fair, the opening establishing shots of the now CG Zamunda zooming into the beautiful palace and entering Prince Akeem's bedroom felt calming and soothing. We were finally back in this fictional land in Africa, and we even see some familiar photos that will guarantee to make you feel all warm and fuzzy. But the minute the plot starts rolling, I knew that this was going to be a very bumpy ride. As you may all have known, the basic premise is Akeem's father, the great King Jafi Jofer, is dying and he is extremely concerned about the future of his great nation. His heir, Prince Akeem, has 3 daughters but no son. This of course creates a crisis regarding the heir to the throne. A general from a neighboring country, lazily called Nix Doria for some odd reason, played here by a very enthusiastic Wesley Snipes, plans to take full advantage of this dire situation and take over the country. To avoid a coup from General Izzy, King Joffre and Semi inform Akeem about his illegitimate son that he has back in America. Yeah, this was my whole problem with the idea of a sequel from the very beginning. We're all aware and have seen the Knights and Queens where Akeem and Semi tirelessly try to find the perfect woman. The whole point of the film was Akeem never once did sow his royal oats, as his father had instructed him to. Akeem simply wanted to find the perfect woman to be his queen and found it in the beautiful and kind-hearted Lisa. But now we have to forcefully accept the fact that not only did Akeem sleep with another woman in Queens, he also impregnated her. All this was told via a muddy flashback to that night at the club, with additional scenes added with the help of some very unconvincing and truthfully creepy CGI/de-aging work. The whole fairy tale aspect of the original is now slowly falling apart. The Akeem we all loved in the first film is not who we thought he was. Akeem had a one-night stand that he didn't even remember. Without giving away too much of the film, Akeem and Semi basically have to return to good old America, hence the title, in search of his son to try to bring him back to Zamunda where he can sit on his throne as the appointed prince. As you may have expected, along the way they make a pit stop to the iconic barbershop Mighty Sharp and reunite with the always colorful and hilarious senior citizens. Yeah, I'm not alone wondering how they're all still alive, but hey, who am I to complain? Because they're the best thing about the film in my opinion. I certainly got most of my laughs from the barbershop scenes, and even these pale in comparison to the original movie. Somehow the barbershop scenes without the F-bombs are simply not the same, no matter how funny the banter gets. So Akeem finally finds his son Lavelle and they go back to Zamunda, his mother coming for the ride as well. For a film called Coming to America, they sure don't stay there for very long. The sequel reverses the whole fish out of water trope with Lavelle, a Queens-born African-American man now adjusting to life in Africa. If this sounds remotely funny or fresh on paper, it sadly does not translate well in the movie. Newcomer Jermaine Fowler does an adequate job and certainly has a charm about him, but he's just not very funny and should have never been given the task to carry the film. That's another thing. The movie never makes it clear who the main character is. Is it Lavelle? It sure seems to be about his story this time around. Akeem's certainly not the main protagonist here, because he's practically a supporting role in this one. Then there's Mika, the eldest daughter of Akeem. Unlike her mother Lisa, that was front and center in the last film but now shoved in the back, she was given something resembling of a character arc. All her life, she was trained to be the next generation ruler and predictably objects to the silly traditional Zamundan laws that state only a man can hold said position. Overall, I had a really difficult time holding on to any of the main characters in the film. But for me, the biggest sin the sequel is guilty of is not the half-baked script or the lackluster performances, rather the endless nods and fan service to the original film. Okay, I admit I quite enjoyed it when they showed the photos from the first film during the opening credits, but I had had enough when they shoved everything we liked about the original film and kept doing so throughout the film. You all remember McDowell's? Well, here it is. Randy Watson and Sexual Chocolate, ta-da, they're all back. Remember these iconic lines from the first film? Here they are again, repeated because we don't have any new ones of our own. It gets annoying really fast and immediately takes you out of the movie. It feels like a parody, a bad one, like one of those SNL sketches or a Super Bowl commercial where they do a follow-up story to a movie you love but doesn't quite have the soul of the original film. Coming to America doesn't have the heart of the first one, but it will try to fool you to think it does. Every scene with Akeem and Lisa in the first film was wonderfully sweet and earnest. Sure, Coming to America was filled with F-bombs and even had nudity in it, but at the end of the day, it's a romantic comedy, a fairy tale, and every fairy tale needs some magic. Sadly, there were none to be found in the sequel. Was it great to see all the cast returning after 30-odd years? Hell yes it was. I loved seeing Eddie and Arsenio back together again. James Earl Jones' return was a welcomed one. The same goes for John Amos, Sherry Hedy, and Paul Bates, but this reunion was not enough to save this very messy and unfunny film. As for the new cast, the additions of comedy big names such as Leslie Jones and Tracy Morgan didn't do much for me. Most of the jokes fell flat. No one is denying how insanely funny these two comics are in real life, but for some reason, they're just not generating any laughs for me. If I had to pick, I would probably crown Wesley Snipes as the best new character, and even his portrayal of General Izzy is too cartoonish and way over the top than needed. But hey, at least it looks like he's having a ball. Something I found rather unfortunate is the way the film never felt cinematic. It has a very late 2000s, early 2010s single camera sitcom quality about it. The shots and the camera movement felt very much like a TV production. Even the way the jokes roll is reminiscent of an episode of 30 Rock or Community. Watching this film, you suddenly long for John Landis's precise direction. Remember the majestic and otherworldly score from the first film? Yeah, that's gone, and only teased a little bit in the beginning. We now have a very generic music template that feels lazy and uninspired. Credits where credits is due, the costume design of this film is spectacular. Every color is vibrant and eye-popping. They did a tremendous job with the costume work this time around. Speaking of Landis, he constructed a very elaborate and impressive dance sequence at the beginning of the original film. After all, he did direct Thriller. In the sequel, Craig Brewer tries to mimic this but doesn't really deliver. Funny enough, there is more than one musical/dance sequence throughout the film, and it's a little puzzling as to why that is. It felt a little out of place. At the end of the day, I really wanted to like this film, but sadly it proved to be an impossible task. It was great seeing Eddie doing another comedy, especially after his amazing and underrated turn in Dolomite, but his return as Akeem is unfortunately not very memorable. I don't think anyone's going to quote any of the lines from this film come 30 years. That's pretty much guaranteed. I guess I'm most disappointed in Craig Brewer. He's a good filmmaker. Hustle and Flow was a decent film, and Dolomite Is My Name was surprisingly funny and energetic, a perfect comeback vehicle for Eddie. He managed to bring back that 80s Eddie Murphy that we all loved and missed. It's too bad that he couldn't do the same for this film. Look, I know what you're thinking. I love the original too much and no sequel will ever top it. Some would also say that nostalgia is what's making me adore the film. Sure, nostalgia has a huge factor, of course. But I recently introduced my son to Coming to America, and it was a joy to see my boy experiencing it for the first time and me catching his reaction. Every joke I loved, he did as well. That's the magic of great movies. They stand the test of time. He also joined me for the sequel, and by the second half, he had already lost interest and didn't even chuckle at the jokes thrown at him. Sequels are extremely hard to pull off. Comedy sequels are even harder. No one can catch lightning in a bottle twice. How do you make people laugh again? How do you surprise them again? It's hard to do. If you retell the same old jokes, would it still be funny? Take a look at The Hangover. It was a sleeper hit back in 2009. It was a great comedy. We as the audience didn't know where the film was going to take us, but we were sure on board. Once they made Hangover 2, they were just basically revisiting the same movie beat by beat, this time in a new location. It failed to have the same impact as the original. The same could be said with Blues Brothers 2000. The longer you wait on making a sequel, the harder it will be to pull it off, especially if it never had a great story idea in the first place. Eddie kept saying that over the years he had turned down the idea of a sequel because they were simply never good enough. This initially gave me hope, but now I'm just baffled that they waited 30 long years to produce this poorly written script. If you enjoy this film, then that's awesome. Good for you. I wish I could have enjoyed it more. I came in with zero expectations because I knew that nothing was going to top the original movie. It was a classic for a reason. Now it's a whole new era and too much had changed since 1988. I don't mind the taming down of the film to a more family accessible feature because the rating has nothing to do with the fault of this film. It just didn't work. The piling cameos are distracting and the film was just one big list of fan service. The female empowerment aspect of the film could have been great, but the writers never really succeed in telling that part of the story. And like everything else in the film, just piled on without a clear focus. In the second act, Coming to America tries to be a little clever and meta and comment on the current state of cinema and how sequels tend to suck. Well, this is awkward. Not too long ago, Bill and Ted Face the Music was released 29 years after the last film. Luckily, that film was pretty good. But after having seen this film, I now have a deeper appreciation for it. Before he officially retires from making movies, Eddie Murphy has one more sequel in his sleeve, Beverly Hills Cop 4. Let's just hope that film will be better than Coming to America. In the meantime, I'm just going to pop in my brand new 4K Blu-ray copy of the original comedy classic. What did you guys think of the movie? Did you like it? Please tell me what you guys think in the comments. I would love to hear your feedback. This review is strictly my personal opinion on the film. In no way should it affect your experience. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this content, please support me by subscribing, sharing, and liking my videos. I truly appreciate it. I'll see you next time.